puts the rise of big business in a little bit of a different light from what you might be used to. We usually think of big business as more of a 20th century phenomenon with some roots in the 19th century, but I'm going to carry it back a little bit farther. I'm going to start actually in 1838. These illustrations are from a couple of years later, in New York Harbor, with two steamboats that were crossing the harbor between Staten Island and Manhattan. One was a very large vessel, the other was much smaller, but the smaller one was packed with people because it was running at half the rate of the larger steamboat. The owner of the smaller steamboat used to taunt the owner of the larger one by leaving a little bit early, pulling up to his dock, ringing the bell, and taking off, and the owner of that larger steamboat was getting furious. So he gave special orders to his captain that morning in September 1838. The two boats left about the same time from Whitehall Slip, where the Staten Island Ferry still docks in Manhattan. And the larger steamboat built up speed, and suddenly veered directly for the smaller steamboat and smashed into it amidships. The smaller steamboat had turned off, veered away at just the last moment. So there was a collision, but it did not sink the smaller steamboat. But that was the intention. The captain had been ordered to ram and sink the other steamboat full of men, women, and children. Testimony from one of the men aboard that smaller steamboat said that the men on board picked up the broken pieces of wood and formed a boarding party to attack the captain and his pilot house if they made another ramming attempt. And the captain of the other ship, who could hear this, hear the cries of the war party, decided that he wouldn't try again. When the two boats landed in Staten Island, the passengers on the rammed ship formed a mob and stormed the ferry house of the larger steamboat's company and tore it to the ground. Well, that larger steamboat company was owned by a corporation. The corporation was the Richmond Turnpike Company. It was closely held. It wasn't a publicly traded company. And the owners of about half the stock wanted out. Needless to say, having their vessel ram and try to sink another vessel full of women and children did not exactly make them feel as if their investment was going to pay off. And so in stepped a man who had a great deal of experience with ferries between Staten Island and New York, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius Vanderbilt bought the half of the stock that was up for sale on the condition that he would have sole control over the management of the company. The competitor the company was fighting against was his own cousin, in fact, Oliver Vanderbilt. And Cornelius Vanderbilt immediately set about trying to make the company profitable, running at a reduced rate, and cutting expenses and filing lawsuits against his cousin. And his cousin, in reply, told the court that he understood that his cousin, Cornelius Vanderbilt, was running the company with the sole view of profit. Well, today, if you're running a business corporation, that's a good way to be sued if you're not running it with the sole view of profit. So this is an interesting moment, and it's a moment that leads the way to the rise of big business, because the corporation is central. You can't have big business on a economy-wide scale. You can have incidents of it. You can't have a large-scale, big business-dominated economy without the corporation. And so what does this mean, that it was criticized for being run for profit? How did our conception of the corporation change? Well, as many of you may know, the corporation got started in America not only by Alexander Hamilton, but he was a key figure as a founder of the Bank of New York, as a Treasury Secretary, not only issuing bonds, federal bonds that people actually wanted, but also establishing the Bank of the United States. He was responsible for most of the securities that were traded in New York on the first early stock exchange. I think there were 5 initially, 3 of which were federal bonds. Here's one of his, not a cohort, but one of his intellectual descendants, you might say, John Quincy Adams, talking about the corporation as a Republican institution. They saw it as part and parcel, its supporters, with the ethos of the early republic, and they also saw it as a public tool.